thanks so much for being here this morning after a brilliant night at the cabaret. Shout out Fluffy and all the cabaret crew. That was incredible. And I feel slightly an interloper here as a non-academic, but also connected to the sense of psychedelic cabaret and playfulness that you lot exhibited last night, which was wonderful. So I'm going to be talking about play and what happens in the brain when children play and the parallels to the psychedelic experience. And as Nikki said, I've been playing and working for many years with a labyrinthine path that had more in common with the pattern of a fern leaf to anything like a conventional career. I learned and built on the glorious, chaotic, radical realm of urban adventure playgrounds, collaborating with communities and making stuff out of what was available. I now run a design and build company that's a non-profit that creates sanctuaries for the imagination. And what does this have to do with a psychedelic convention, you may be wondering? And this talk isn't about giving trips to kids, unlike some basic pals who've mentioned when I said I was so excited about talking here. Nor is it about making tree houses or structures, though if you do want to know that, you can DM me. Rather, I'd like to share with you some ideas about the parallels of play and the psychedelic realm that I've noticed, and maybe they will settle in you like glitter in a snow globe. We become human through play and discover our uniqueness and our relationship to the earth and each other and the world around us, and our own specific drive and talents. Psychedelics can reconnect us to that playful sense of infinite possibilities and create a sense of open curiosity, experimental thinking, and a connection to both our deep interior world and an intoxication with the momentary, transitory impossibility of our existence at all. My friendship with LSD began in the mid-90s. And importantly, it bounced into a heart that was loved with a secure and playful childhood. It inspired me to nourish the mycelium connections of community, create lasting positive social and environmental impact, and hopefully, without it sounding too culty, infuse love on every project that I build. And of course, brilliantly, giving you a psychedelic kick up the bum when you become too annoyingly earnest. The opening address by Mac McCartney resonated with me on many levels, but especially regarding the connection to and awareness of the limitation for others that do not have the money or the emotional and psychological experience of security, of the luxury of the individual psychedelic enlightenment. Maybe they have experienced a traumatic or play-deprived childhood, which has many complicated impacts on mind, body, and spirit. So I specialise in co-design and co-creation with children and young people. These are some of the things we've been working on over the last 15 years. An inclusive, non-extractive collaboration to empower individuals with fun new skills and create new structures, plant playable mini forests and build playgrounds. Most of all, I really enjoy listening to them and hearing their dreams, advocating for them and facilitating imaginative spaces that can hold multiple levels of playing out the ideas of what it means to be human. Over the years, I've designed and built structures as varied as a fully wheelchair-accessible tree house, a 5-metre-high vertical drop slide, taught hundreds of young people woodworking skills, and importantly, taught adults how to counter their own risk aversion when working with children and embrace the power of play. Behaviour change through honest vulnerability, trust and support. I'm really interested in designing for neurodiversity. Shout out to the Neurospicy massive out there. Scaled to the child's experience. And as Nikki said, we're really interested in our role in mitigating the effects of climate change on children's access to play in a playful way. And that's working with trees and plants as partners and considering the the length of how long a structure and a playground might be there for. This is a tree house 7 years after we planted the trees around it, and it's created a beautiful microclimate that is really important in London, where I work, where there's extreme temperatures in the summer, so much so that children aren't allowed to go out and play sometimes. Working with thousands of children in London schools, adventure playgrounds and youth clubs, we've witnessed their capacity for making models and drawing their response to the boring or non-existent play spaces they have access to, and their vision for thoughtful, expansive responses to their play deprivation. The skill after that is in filtering the concepts and ideas into actual buildable things, recognising the variety and diversity in the play ecosystem, and also the engineering impossibility of actually hanging a swing from a real cloud or building a flaming walking tree house. So we do that by yes-anding them at all stages. How would it work? Really involving them, thinking about the engineering and what makes it fun and how can we make it more fun? Who are you going to go on it with? How's it going to work? And realising that their reference points might be from telly or computer games, and that's really interesting too, because they come up with ideas that I wouldn't have thought of, like this structure they called pixel parkour, and we actually built something real life that was inspired by Minecraft building blocks. So that's me, and now I'm going to go into a bit about the sort of theory of play and the background of play. That's probably a little bit small, apologies, but what is play? So Einstein said play is the highest form of research. Maslow, the hierarchy of needs geezer, said almost all creativity involves purposeful play. And my favourite one, Martin Buber, play is the exaltation of the possible. And I love that because it's so expansive and non-prescriptive. When working with adults in play, if they're particularly risk-averse or resistant to allowing children access a proper play environment, I find it helpful for them to connect back to their own play memories. And if you feel comfortable, we're going to do that now. And if not, that's fine. I put a photograph of the Crab Nebula from the James Webb Space Telescope that you can just feast your eyes on and just zone out for a bit in a lovely Saturday morning way. This photograph is taken of a thing that's 6,500 light years away. Isn't that amazing? But if you do feel like going into a play memory, I'd invite you to close your eyes and take a deep breath in and recall, if you will, a play memory from your childhood. Maybe you're on your own, maybe you're with friends. You might be far away from your home, working out how to get home, or maybe you're in your flat, making a den out of sheets behind the sofa. Right, open your eyes. One thing I can guarantee, even though every single one of your memories would be completely different and specific to you, is you probably recalled it instantly. And that's the power of play. It's seen as superficially frivolous, but it's profound in its effects. And I see it as fractal in its limitless possibilities for the individual and community and wider society, similar to tripping. One of my favourite writers on play, Gordon Sturrock, said that trying to define play is like trying to define love. It's impossible. But many people have tried, and here's some of them. Brian Sutton Smith identified 7 play-based rhetorics in the ambiguity of play. And can you see that text? I love this because on almost every one you could substitute the psychedelic experience for that. Play as adaptation, play as existential optimism, play as hegemony, social context, transformation, peak experience, and play as the world upside down. One aspect of play that I love and shares a lot in common with the psychedelic experience is the switch between the sacred and silly that can happen, fluctuating almost sub-second level. Through fantasy play, children can explore the world with symbolism, ritual, and transformation. Their brains and bodies, when immersed in play, mirror the experience of perspective shift, expansiveness, body curiosity, and mortality we can experience psychedelically. These children, we see them as laughing, but they're in Gaza and they're playing the funeral game. And I think that's a really vivid example of the importance for children to play out the experiences, not necessarily just the positive experiences of being human. Play has therapeutic benefits. Catherine Fisher came up with this brilliant play prism, which has play on the left-hand side as the white light, play work in the middle, and exploding out of it in rainbow colours. You've got all the benefits of what happens to a child when they're playing in a healthy, diverse play environment. Again, this many parallels with psychedelic work. This one I refer to the most when working with adults. This is Bob Hughes, who wrote the Taxonomy of Play Types, and he theorised there were 16 different play types. One of my favourite ones is recapitulative, which he posited why children are compelled to make dens and build fires is they're playing out the evolutionary past of how we've become human. Also, deep play, another massive favourite one. This is play that one of the outcomes might be death, but children are still compelled to do it, to dance on the edge of chaos and their own limitations. And there's ways we can replicate that feeling. If anyone's ever jumped off a top diving board and got that feeling of like, I don't know if I can do it and I really think I might die, the feeling is real. Csikszentmihalyi, apologies, that's probably not how you pronounce his name, a psychologist that identified the flow state. I think it was a few decades away now, but I put that in. Do you know it, the flow state? Obviously, I thought probably most of you have been aware of it, and I put that in, this idea of if you can balance between challenge and skill level, that sweet spot in the middle, that you've got a positive, ongoing, immediate feedback loop and a sense of time becoming elastic. Again, that experience we have in a psychedelic realm. He trained corporates. They paid a lot of money to try and access this state. And the brilliant thing I love about that is that children are doing it all the time. Gordon Sturrock said that children at play engage in the production and sharing of internalized gestalts. They are alive in the moment with no concern of the past or future. An absolutely fantastic space to be in. So, the benefits of play: individually calibrated risk-taking, dynamic thinking, sensory maturation of the brain, and proprioception. Those ones really interest me because if you see children turning somersaults on like bike racks and basically anywhere they'll try and do a somersault, ramps going up, handrails and stuff, and they're actually compelled to do that and they need to do it for their brain development. That's why adults often feel sick on waltzers. It's because our brains have reached a certain development when we don't feel that urge to do that sense of movement. It actually literally grows and develops the neurons in the brain. Overcoming the fear of failure, creative thinking, fine and gross motor dexterity, and just the more sort of philosophical ones like the curiosity of the world around you and emotional empathy and relational capability. I just put this in. I was working with some children recently and they invented a deadly slide that you flew over exposed spikes. But there was a calm corner next to it. Children are really clever. So my background is in adventure playgrounds. Did anyone play on an adventure playground? Yes, I'm so excited about that. For those that didn't, adventure playgrounds came to the UK in the 50s. An amazing woman called Marjorie Allen went to Denmark and she worked with Theo Sorensen, who's a landscape architect, who was exploring the ideas of junk playgrounds, which is spaces children have a variety of materials to create. And she brought back this idea and popularised it in London in the bomb sites, which literally was converting the physical terrain that had been carved by a bomb into a place of joy and delight, reshaping that terrain, free at the point of access for children and young people. They were really radical spaces. A lot of the play workers that worked there were artists and art students, no doubt trip heads, there's another little link. But the aesthetics were defined by the materials available. Nets came from the docks, and there was this brilliant sense of co-collaboration between the sculptors and the children. And for me, there's a direct lineage to this, which not just aesthetically, because they're both in black and white because it was the past, but Reclaim the Streets, road protests of the 90s and rave culture, a sense of who has the right to be in these streets, in these cities, and what happens in them. This is where I first met LSD, incidentally. Play is not Peppa Pig. I've got real beef with Peppa Pig, even though she's a pig, so I should have pork with her. But it's... There's no acknowledgement of the value of mystery, nature, or the recombination of objects and non-prescriptive opportunities. There's a commodification of play that adds to the disparity of access, and there's no consideration for sensory needs for a diverse range of children, and it reinforces gender paradigms, and they are exclusionary for children that live in poverty. The picture on the top left is from Tim Gill's book, who's an amazing writer on play, and he coined this term KFC playgrounds, kit, fence and carpet, which is really basic. It would have cost quite a lot to install this, but psychologically, philosophically, aesthetically, incredibly bleak. But according to developers, this is what a playground is. And I see as much in common as a playground as that. It's eating a bucket of chicken nuggets to co-creating a homegrown meal together and eating it together. There is no soul. Simon Nicholson, who was Barbara Hepworth's son, wrote in a radical architecture magazine in the 1970s about the theory of loose parts, which we use a lot when working with children. It's basically in any environment, the degree of inventiveness and creativity and the possibility of discovery are directly proportional to the number and kind of variables within it. Basically messing about with stuff. That's the kind of more academic words we have to use to get teachers to let children mess about with stuff. Politically, the right to play is enshrined in Article 31 of the UN Convention of Human Rights, and this is the first play principle. All children and young people need to play. The impulse to play is intrinsically motivated. It's a biological drive. It's inside you, and it's necessary for our development. This photograph is from a project we did in Halabja in Kurdistan, and it shows the infinite creativity of children because these 7 girls made a seesaw out of a stick and 3 breeze blocks, but they'd never seen a seesaw before, and there wasn't one in their sort of vision or experience. But by messing about, they created this thing together. Sean Edwards of the Playwork Foundation said this quote that I love. Children and young people just want to exist. They don't come to the playground to play, they come to just be, to take a breath of relief and allow what their brains and bodies want to flood in, while play workers maintain a levy against the outside world. I think that's really special. And again, I see a lot of parallels with what we're seeking with investigations in the psychedelic realm. Just that sense of taking a breath for a moment and the intensity of the pressures and of the world we're in now. So, 10 minutes. Thank you. So, where are we now for children? It's actually pretty bleak. Lots of studies have shown, recent studies have shown that the distance children can roam freely and their sense of independence is reduced. Their access to and contact with nature is lessened. Combine this with increasing risk aversion, rising poverty and its associated stresses. There's a load of outcomes, including anxiety, obesity, depression, and young people achieving independence much later. This impacts not only on them, but creates a generation with less creative resilience, confidence to experiment, fail, and embrace change. We sneer at teenagers for being inside on their screens, but we've cloaked them in fear, reduced their sense of freedom, defunded youth clubs, adventure playgrounds, and the right of a free higher education in art. This leads to a shifting baseline syndrome in what we think is normal in our society. Apologies, this is very small, but shown here is a map of Sheffield. There's 4 generations of the same family, and these radiuses show the area they were allowed to roam, age 8. So the grandfather went 8 miles fishing, and then the grandson was only allowed to go 300 metres to the end of his road. Ecologically, the comparison is birdsong. Every generation remembers hearing more birdsong when they were young, but the numbers decline each generation. We tend to assume our childhood was the norm, and we do not question this baseline shift. Though here, you all do, which is so exciting. All the writers and academics and policymakers and psychedelic advocates are working against the societal assumption that humans should not have access to the psychedelic experience. And now I've got to finish by somehow tying up a map of Sheffield, songbirds, acid play in playgrounds and raves. So going back to Mac's talk at the start of the conference, what are we doing to bring a flavour of the luminous world of psychedelic potential thinking to those outside that world, which is children and young people in my case, to strengthen and expand our own creative communities? And I'd suggest taking a breath and surrendering to the unknown, seeing the magic of play and how it is inside you and all the children and young people you know, for free, always. Support children to start fires and climb trees. And coming back to the bird in the top right, it's a nightingale. It's very rare in the UK, but once was very common, like the sight of children playing out in the street was in past generations. On a rewilding project in Sussex, they realised the nightingale population rose significantly when they surrendered to letting go of the idea of what the landscape it preferred was. It wasn't manicured lawns and grand trees, but brambles and scrubland. The liminal, messy thickets, they're overlooked as not productive or beautiful by landscapers. Very similar ecologically and aesthetically to the landscape of an adventure playground, and just as rich for play. The complex, nuanced, unpredictable, messy and magically weird relationship with LSD provided that bramble-like sanctuary for my creativity too. And if we can surrender to the edge of chaos and let the literal and metaphorical brambles grow, to nurture a psychedelic, playful, feral future, it will bear tasty fruit and fractal, expansive creativity. Thank you.